Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to this BiggerPlate webinar, where we're going to be talking about mind mapping with MindManager. My name is Liam Hughes. I'm joining you today from the beautiful city of Bogota in Colombia, where I'm hoping the outside noises of traffic, sirens, and Bogota life in general won't disturb us today for the next hour, while I'm going to try and show you some of the core features and benefits of the MindManager software that you can see on your screen in front of you right now. Now, I'm going to shut off my camera in just a moment, just so it's not distracting while we're looking at the screen. But before I begin, I just want to encourage anyone who's joining today to use the chat box here in Hopin to let me know where you are in the world, where you're joining from, and importantly, let me know if you have any specific questions about MindManager or mind mapping in general that you'd like me to try and cover during this session. I'll give you a brief welcome and an introduction in just a moment, where I'll show you what we are going to cover today and also what we're not. But it's always lovely for me to know who's on the line today, where you're coming from, and if there's anything specifically that we can do to help you go further with your mapping, as always. So let's dive into our presentation here, which you can see on the screen is this MindManager map. I'm just going to switch off my camera so you haven't got me distracting you down the side here. I can see a couple of people already letting me know where they're joining from. Hello to those who've said there. I can see Dan in Southwest Colorado is letting me know specifically where he is. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for joining us today. So it's also useful for me to know if at any point the sound or the screen sharing is not working as it's perhaps supposed to. I'm always reliant on the Wi-Fi in the place I'm located, which is not always as good as it might be some other places. So hopefully we'll get through today without any issues with sound or what's on the screen. So let's jump into our mind map and hopefully get you up and running and excited with MindManager. So first and foremost, as we look at the screen here, what we're going to do is work our way around this mind map. So for those of you who are really new to mind mapping, a good principle to keep in mind, and the way that most mind mapping software, including MindManager, works, is they tend to build mind maps sort of clockwise. So if you imagine looking at this as if it's the face of a clock, we're going to work clockwise around this, starting with welcome, moving through these topics around the bottom here, and then finishing up here with a cocktail and conclusions. So that's just a good principle for reading mind maps as well as writing them. And you'll see how we move through the map as I go through this presentation. So, as I say, welcome to the session. My name is Liam Hughes. I'm the founder of BiggerPlate.com. My contact details are there on the screen, and what's really nice about these webinars is after every webinar, I usually get a really nice flurry of emails and a nice flurry of LinkedIn invitations. So I invite you all to connect with me and let me know what you're trying to achieve with MindManager. And of course, if there's ways we can help you either with the resources that are on BiggerPlate.com or with some more direct help, then we'll be very happy to do that. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what BiggerPlate is or what we do, our purpose, our mission, the reason we exist really is to help people go further with mind mapping, whether that's in their working, in business, in their studies, or at home. It really doesn't matter what the area is. Our goal is to help them go further. Now, we do that by covering all sorts of different things, but always with mind mapping as the core focus. What we're most known for is the provision of a huge mind map library, which contains thousands of templates and examples for multiple software products, including MindManager. And that just is a really great way to give you ideas for how to use mind mapping in your world, but also it can save you a lot of time. You can take templates and examples other people have created and just adapt those templates for your own uses. It's not just a picture of a mind map, it's the actual usable file. So if maybe you're having trouble writing a business plan, we've got loads of business plan templates you can download, get rid of the bits you don't want, and then build up on the pieces that you do want. So that's probably what BiggerPlate's most known for, is our mind map library. But we also provide a huge range of e-learning courses. We provide regular virtual events. For example, just this week, live tomorrow, in fact, we've got a virtual event which is about mind mapping for management and leadership. So if anybody's in the role or sort of a current or a future leaders and managers of the world, well worth joining to see how mind mapping might enable and empower you to succeed in your management and leadership objectives. We also have a huge range of videos on the website, over 200 webinar recordings covering a really wide range of topics, always, of course, showing how mind mapping is being used in the real world by real users of these tools and techniques. So out of that 200 webinar replays, for example, probably 190 of them are of real mind mapping software users from around the world showing you what they're doing with these tools. The remainder is probably me chatting about something. We also provide training and support services for organizations, particularly who are looking to introduce mind mapping into their organization. So for example, if you're about to roll out MindManager in your organization, but you're not quite sure sort of how to help people get started, that's usually something we can help with. So a very important thing to say up front to hopefully help you understand who we are and what we do is that we are software neutral. So today's webinar is about MindManager, but it's really important to understand that we are independent. We don't work for MindManager. They don't own us. They're a very long-term partner of us, but as are many other mind mapping software products. BiggerPlate doesn't make any mind mapping software, and we don't sell any mind mapping software. It's a very important thing for us because it means we're able to offer people and organizations independent, impartial, neutral guidance and help if they're trying to introduce and adopt mind mapping techniques. So just remember that while we're very strong advocates for MindManager, we're also strong advocates for some of the other mind mapping tools out there, and we really don't have a horse in the race. If you start using any mind mapping software product, we're going to be happy because it means you're going to go further in your studies, in your work, and we believe in sort of life in general. So a final note on BiggerPlate.com, if you wanted to upgrade to our Pro membership, you can do that using this discount code that's on the screen here. That's an offer that ends on the 31st of October. So if you haven't yet upgraded to BiggerPlate Pro, which is going to give you access to everything on BiggerPlate really, maybe take a look at that screenshot option, get that saved, and maybe use this discount code in red here if you choose to upgrade to save 25%, it should probably say there, on the price of Pro membership, which is already pretty affordable anyway. So that's enough about BiggerPlate.com. What about this webinar? What have you signed up for, and what are you in for over the next 54 minutes of your very precious time? Well, what we're going to try and cover, or what I'm going to try and cover, is your MindManager core features. We're not going to go into the depths and depths of the advanced stuff. MindManager is probably one of the most powerful mind mapping software tools out there, and there's some really fantastic advanced features. We're not going to look at that today because it's not what the majority of people are using MindManager for. They're using it for these really core features that help them to capture and organize their ideas and information. I'm then going to just touch on sort of 3 use domains. There's a lot of overlap between the 3 of these, but I'm going to just show you some examples of MindManager mind maps being used in a work setting. I'm going to show you some examples of MindManager maps in a studying context, and even some examples of how you might use them on a sort of personal or home basis as well. I then will hopefully leave plenty of time for any questions that might come in. Again, I encourage you to get those questions in as early as possible because it really helps me hopefully wrap them up coherently towards the end and answer them with time to spare, or answer them as I'm going through the presentation so we can hopefully make sure you go away fully happy with what you've covered today. In terms of what I'm not going to be covering, just want to make very clear, remember what I said earlier, we don't sell any mind mapping software, including MindManager. So I'm not going to be talking about the sales of MindManager, pricing, setting up your accounts, anything like that. If you have any questions about that, you need to speak to the lovely people at MindManager. Similarly with tech support, if for some reason you're having issues with your MindManager software, or you're trying to install it in certain ways and it's not quite working, again, unfortunately, we're not the people to help you with that. We're just here to help you understand the mind mapping techniques that are possible with MindManager. So we're not going to be covering sales, pricing, or tech support, but we are going to be hopefully giving you a really good sense of what is possible with MindManager. So that leads us down here into our MindManager branch. Let's see what we can just reveal here. So MindManager has been a BiggerPlate partner since 2008, which is when we first launched. So the website BiggerPlate.com went live in January 2008. So we're actually coming up for 15 years of being on live, which is quite crazy to me, really. I started BiggerPlate when I was 21, so that gives you a slight sense of how I've spent my adult life. So MindManager, really, we like to just give a sense of what do we think are the sort of 3 most powerful or most important aspects of any software when we do these webinars. In terms of MindManager, we think the 3 most sort of important sort of benefits or features, if you like, or sort of more benefits than features actually around MindManager are: it's incredibly powerful, it's very professional in its appearance and what it can create, and it's a very powerful planning tool. So in terms of that power, probably it's fair to say MindManager is one of the most capable mind mapping tools when it comes to handling large volumes of information in a single mind map. You can build, and we have built, and we've built with clients, very big, complex mind maps containing huge amounts of information. And what you'll find is MindManager won't slow down. It doesn't struggle under the weight of that information. Whereas some other products, you might find there's just a little bit of a lag that creeps in as you start to build very big maps. I'm yet to experience that with MindManager, and that's even with building quite frankly, stupidly large maps that probably should be broken down into smaller maps. But importantly, MindManager isn't going to struggle with really big, complex information handling, which is one of its key strengths in the mind mapping software market. The second kind of key benefit of MindManager is it's very professional in its design, in its branding, and really in terms of its presentation overall. Those of you who are using sort of Microsoft Windows tools, you'll notice that this menu up here probably looks pretty similar to those you're familiar with sort of Windows and PowerPoint, these sort of things. MindManager has, as long as I've engaged with it, always been pretty heavily geared towards business use, professional users. And as a result, you get a very slick professional style of interface and a very slick professional style of mind map. Somebody once described it to me many years ago as a more boardroom friendly version of mind maps. Now, mind maps as a label and mind maps as a document type can sometimes be a little bit tricky to introduce to other people if they're not familiar with it. Sometimes there's resistance for reasons that are slightly baffling sometimes, but part of the reason there's sometimes resistance is because it looks different. It's quite often colorful, it's quite often got these kind of images in it, and so sometimes what you need to do is sort of smooth off the edges and make the mind map more palatable perhaps to those who are unfamiliar, and MindManager is a great tool for that. It can really give you a very professional looking document, and you don't even need to mention the word mind mapping when you're sharing it or showing it to others, but you can give them a very powerfully, very coherently designed, structured diagram of information. So the professional style of the product and also what you can create with the product is a second sort of major strength of MindManager. And then the third, and really where we see MindManager being used probably the most, is in planning. Now, that's not only just the basic map building and information handling that we've talked about earlier, but MindManager also has probably some of the best task management features in the mind mapping software space, particularly around task information. So I'll show you in a little bit when we get into the features of MindManager. It's got great functionality in the tool to just enable you to add task information into your mind maps and really build out quite comprehensive project plans using a single mind map. Now, I often refer to mind mapping software as the best project management tool for the rest of us. So if you're not a professional project manager, but you are required to manage projects and plan projects in your work, I would suggest mind mapping software, and MindManager in particular, is a very, very good tool to use and a much more easy to use tool than some of the heavyweight project management tools, which are quite frankly confusing and overkill for most of us. So MindManager is a great example of a tool that can help you with your planning around the who, the what, the when in particular projects. And then also, as I'll show you in just a moment, it's got very powerful filtering functions, which again is still relatively unique actually in the mind mapping software field. There aren't many tools that have the same power of filtering options as MindManager. So if you build out comprehensive documents and plans using MindManager, the ability to filter and refine that diagram down to just the key information that you need to see right now is very, very powerful from a day-to-day planning and management standpoint. So let's take a look at some of these key features of MindManager. I'm just going to flick momentarily over and just check for any questions. Got a very quiet group on the line today. Hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. So welcome any questions, of course, but can't see anything coming in at the moment. I'm going to assume you can still hear me all okay, and I shall press on. So let's look at some of these core features of MindManager. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are a lot of features in MindManager, and even just a quick scan along this menu up here will show you some of the most basic stuff is here. And then you can go really into the depths and detail. A lot of features and functionality here, from design, formatting, task information, exports and imports to other tools. We're not going to go too far into the depths here. I just want to show you what we believe to be the most powerful parts of MindManager, which is really building mind maps adding some visual aspects that help to bring clarity to the work, and then also, as I said earlier, adding a depth of information into your mind maps that can be extremely powerful without being overwhelming. So let's take a look first at map building. Very, very simple stuff. Hopefully for those of you who are brand new to MindManager, this will just reassure you that it's not a steep learning curve. It's very straightforward stuff. So with any mind map, we've obviously got a mind map that's sort of pre-built here for my presentation, but in any mind map, all we can do here in MindManager is use the insert or tab keys to go outwards, to expand outwards. So this is me just clicking the insert key on my keyboard. And then we can also use the enter or return keys to sort of build downwards. So if you see here, I click return or enter to go down, and then insert to go outwards, return to go down, insert to go outwards. Of course, I can jump back to any topic and use those same keys. And what we're really going to see building up very quickly in a mind map is this sort of tree structure. And this is really at the core power of a mind map, is breaking information down into its topics, subtopics, and sub-subtopics, etc. So you get this tree structure of information. It helps you really understand the hierarchy of information, what belongs together, and what information is connected to what information. But all we're using to do that largely is our keyboard. Now you can, in MindManager, use the menu up the top to do this. So you see if I come up here, I've got options to say a new topic, which is the down option, or a new subtopic, which is the out option. Now, in reality, this is a pretty slow way to build a mind map, to be constantly jumping up to this menu, not a particularly efficient way to build maps quickly. So I'd strongly advise you to just get used to using your keyboard, to just use the insert, return keys. And of course, as soon as you create a topic, you just start typing. Better than I can, you're in an advantage. So we just add information, and you'll see the keyboard just enables us to go fast rather than keep jumping up with our mouse back and forward. And again, our hands have to leave the keyboard in order to do that. So I'd suggest just using the keyboard to really get used to doing insert or tab key, whichever works on your laptop, your computer, and then the insert return key. So importantly, once we start to build out that tree structure, we might start to realize that certain things might not quite be where we actually want them to be. And that's where the real power of mind mapping comes in, which is to move and reorder and restructure the information. So we can move a single topic by clicking on it with our mouse and just dragging, holding onto that mouse. And you'll see that MindManager shows us with this sort of blue line where that topic is going to land once I let go of the mouse. So if I let go now, you see it's going to land there. So we can move single topics quickly and easily around the structure, and we can also move multiple topics. So for example, I can drag my mouse across multiple topics and move both of them at once using the same system. You see drag and move, and MindManager tells us with that blue indicator where it's going to land. So I'm going to drop those back where they were and pull this single one back down here as well. And this is just a very important way of when you sort of brainstorm an idea and you maybe realize that maybe you put something in a certain area, but now think it might be better in a new branch. You can just move things around very easily. Importantly, you can also move not just a single topic sort of on the end of the branch structure, but you can actually move entire branches. So for example, we can move this entire map building branch and all of the information that's beneath it, we can move that wherever we want. Again, we just take that. Now just recognize what's happening here is MindManager is moving a huge volume of information at once without me having to really do much more than just drag and drop. So as your maps, your project plans, your business plans, your studying maps, whatever it might be, as they get big and large, you might decide that an entire chunk of information is not quite in the right place. And you see how easy it is there for me to pull an entire branch across to a more logical position in the mind map diagram. Very, very powerful way of organizing your ideas and information. As your map starts to grow, what you're going to want to be able to do competently and easily is navigate around the mind map. There's some really simple but very powerful features here. So one of the most kind of basic functions of mind mapping software, but perhaps one of the most important, is the ability to simply show and hide information. So you'll notice up here we've got this little plus symbol here to just indicate to me that there are some topics hidden attached to this one here, and if I click them, it's going to open them up and show them to me. Likewise down here. But the ability to hide that information, click that little minus symbol and hide that when I'm not focused there, is a very powerful way of helping us to keep our focus in the key areas at the right time. So a practical tip that I always share with people is to hide the information in the mind map just using these little plus and minus symbols. Hide the information you're not working with right now. It just means your map is going to be manageable, easier for you to understand and work around, and you're not going to sort of have so many sort of things perhaps diverting or pulling your attention away. You can focus right in where you want to be. As your map gets larger, you can also start to use one of the sort of simplest but really great navigation functions of MindManager, which I don't really know what its technical name would be, but I just call it the map grab. And you'll see that if I use my left mouse button and click into sort of any of the sort of blank space here in the map, or my right click button, sorry, we can sort of get this little hand that sort of just pulls the canvas around. So it's almost like if you imagine just moving a piece of paper around. Now you can use these sliders to move around the canvas, the bottom one and the side one. But again, in terms of the time, milliseconds, of course, but every time I want to move the map, I don't want to have to move my mouse over to the side or down to the bottom. I find the map grab much easier and much more precise. I can pull the map in much smaller increments, whereas those sliders, as you just saw, can sometimes take me a bit too far either way. So learning to grab the map and pull it around and move it where you need is very important, as is zooming in and out. Now with the equipment I've got in front of me, what I like to do is use the control key and the little mouse wheel to zoom in or to zoom out. But you could also use the control key and the plus and minus keys on your keyboard, or of course you can even use these little sliders down here in the software. Again, a little bit less precise and a bit of a hassle. Again, quite easy to get used to those keyboard shortcuts. So the combination of zooming, showing and hiding, and grabbing and moving the map as you need means you get a really fantastic balance between the micro details, so zooming right in on the particular items that we're talking about now, or if we want, zooming right out to just understand where are we in the overall scheme of things, the overall flow of our presentation or our document. One of the great powerful benefits of mind mapping software is that ability to see both the micro view, the details, and zoom out to get that macro view, that more holistic picture of the whole thing. Really valuable, and not something you really get through other tools and other ways of organizing information. So if you can learn to just be adding and building your maps using your keyboard, move and reorder the topics using your mouse, and then navigate easily around your map just using the showing and hiding, the grabbing and the zooming, you're pretty much halfway there to, in my opinion, most of the benefits you're going to get out of mind mapping software. Now that might be underselling the MindManager software somewhat, but it's these things that I think really give people a huge bulk of the benefit they get from mind mapping tools. So I'm hopefully showing you how simple and how small the learning curve is to get started with MindManager. Now, as you build up your MindManager maps, or perhaps a reason why you've been attracted to MindManager or mind mapping tools in general, is this idea of working a little bit more visually. Now, I'm always slightly cynical of this word visual, because really that just implies you have to use your eyeballs. But I think what people are meaning is they can make something a little bit more personal to them, something a little bit more visually engaging, more interesting than a linear document, for example. So what are our options here in MindManager? Well, to be honest, there are masses. Of course, we're not going to go into them all, but you've got lots of options for formatting individual topics. So for example, we can do a right click and say format this topic. And we've got lots of options here. Alternatively, we can just come up into this main menu and you'll see the same formatting options here. So it really just depends on sort of whether you prefer those contextual menus or this sort of high-level option. And we've got options here to change pretty much every aspect of that individual topic that you can think of, from the font, the size, the coloring, the outline. Everything really is customizable here in MindManager. And that gives you really great options, for example, when it comes to branding for your mind map. So if you're creating documents in an organization where there are perhaps some brand guidelines or just some style that you want to sort of adopt for your mind maps, to come up with sort of a custom style, you've got plenty of formatting options here in MindManager. We've got lots of YouTube tutorials about formatting in MindManager if you want to see some of the ins and outs of how to do certain things. You can format individual topics, but you can, of course, format entire branches. So we can change the color of this entire branch. he says, and then fails horribly to do so. You can change the color of the branch so that all of the information changes. So you can really make certain information stand out in the map, change the branch style, change the branch color, the line thickness, whatever it is you might like to do, all within a set of menus in the software. Just going to undo some of those changes so I don't confuse myself. Another key area for mind mapping software is the addition of images and icons. You'll see at the sort of highest level, if I zoom out here in the map, I've added some images just to these kind of main headings. I advise you to be sort of cautious with using images in your mind maps. You can actually sort of end up overdoing it. Some people will really advocate that mind maps have to have images in them. I just don't think that's true at all. Images should be added to a mind map if they add some clarity and value. They shouldn't just be added because somebody said so or just because you can. However, if you want to add images into your mind maps, you've got lots of options in MindManager. You can use the inbuilt MindManager library, which we can pop open over here on the right hand side. You'll see we've got a sort of folder structure with different categories of image, a very, very large library of images covering all sorts of weird and wonderful topics, as well as some perhaps more predictable ones like business and strategy. So we can quickly add in images into our MindManager maps, and importantly, we can also slightly customize those. So perhaps it's a bit big, we can double click on that image. We can make it bigger if we wanted, or we can make it smaller. We can also even move the location of that image within the individual topic. So again, loads of very powerful customization options within MindManager. An invaluable tool you can also do is add images from your own computer. So if you're perhaps creating a mind map in a business setting, you might want to pull in a diagram or a graphic or a graph to illustrate a particular piece of information. Maybe if it's a studying map, you might want to pull in an image of the particular person that you're studying, or a diagram or a map, perhaps a geographical map rather. So we can just pull those in from our own computer by saying up here to go to Insert. And then we can come along here to say an image. It's just going to pop open a dialog here, and I've got a little image just saved on my desktop as an example. I click to insert that, and you'll see it's inserted the image at whatever size that image is. This one, obviously a bit big, so again, I could double click it and resize it. Or a little trick that's really neat in MindManager, particularly I find useful for diagrams. So if you want to insert like a graph or a graphic into the map, you don't necessarily want to have it this big in your topic, but obviously if it's much smaller, it's not going to be particularly easy for people to sort of actually understand what that graphic says. So a really nice feature in MindManager, if I just make that image big again, is to actually click on the image, come down to the image option and say convert to thumbnail. And what that does is in the map, you'll see when I click that, it just kind of makes it mini, but little magnifying glass tells me that if I click that, it's going to pop open a bigger version. So maybe you've got a pie chart or a bar graph or some graphic that you want people to see, but you don't want it to sort of take up so much space in the map. That feature is a really nice little slightly hidden feature within the MindManager software that we really love. So that thumbnail image, another great way of bringing more visual interest and useful images into your map. Another type of sort of visual that we can insert into our MindManager maps are icons, and these are distinct and different from images. Images are, if you like, sort of non-functional. They're for viewing only, whether it's a graph or graphic or just something to make it look a bit nicer like this one here. Icons are a little bit different. Icons are literally sort of little markers for the software that are going to kind of feed into other things like the filtering function. So we've got lots of marker or icon options in MindManager. So if we pop open that menu here, you'll see we've got markers for things like priorities. So maybe you've got 3 items on the to-do list. You can mark them as priority 1, 2, or 3, whatever they might be. You can also mark progress, so completion. Starting to get into that task management function, we can say something is 50% done, 75% done, or even 100% done. We can also use just sort of other individual icons, maybe like flags or some of these single icons to maybe highlight if something needs attention or something is a risk area, for example. Really powerful little visual cues and signals to build into our mind maps. And importantly, as I said earlier, these are functional, which means they actually feed into the filtering of MindManager. Which we can just show you actually as a quick illustration now. So the filtering in MindManager can be found down here. And so we've added these icons in, and it means what we can do is we can say to the software, show me any topics in the whole mind map that have been given one or particular more icon. So for example, let's say we want to see any icon, any topics in the map that are being used with this little sort of wink smiley emoji thing. That's a pretty good English name. Or perhaps let's see any tasks that are marked as priority 1. So let's say to MindManager, show us those, and you'll see what we get here is the software just clears out everything else apart from those topics with those icons. So the little wink key, oh, that's what it was for. That was that little emoji that we used there. And you see the software has found us another example of that being used over there. And then I asked it also to show me everything that's in the priority 1 category. So everything with this red priority 1 category. So hopefully you can see as your mind maps get big and comprehensive and really built out, if you're using these markers, these icons in a systematic way, you're going to give yourself some really powerful ways to quickly reduce very big mind maps down to the essential information you need to see right now. Whether you ask the software to show you tasks that are 50% done or not started, or anything that's got this exclamation mark, the priority icons, the icons in general, really powerful way to manage that information within the map. Some other little visual tools within the software, you've got things like a relationship line. So this is a nice way of drawing a connection between things that might live in different areas on the sort of the tree structure. So you can just draw these lines between two topics in the map. If you want to redraw them, you can say, actually, I think it belongs with that one instead. You can just pull those markers, those control points to get the shape you like. And of course, because it's MindManager, you've got lots of options to actually format the shape, the style of that relationship line in itself for whatever reasons, including adding a label to perhaps explain why there's a connection. So a quick word of caution. I'm sure you can see that the benefit of this is items that are in different locations in the map structure, for example, perhaps ones that are quite far apart. So let's attach some that are quite far apart. It's a nice way of just showing that there's some connections here, even though they're in different areas of the mind map. If we close down that branch, you'll see that the line gets hidden. But a word of caution, just be wary of using too many of these lines, because if you try and show relationships between everything, you'll see pretty quickly that's going to become pretty sort of visually noisy, if that's not too confusing as a phrase. It's just clutter and it's not adding to the clarity. So use those selectively, I would say, but know that that's there as an option. So relationships is one option. Boundaries is another little feature in MindManager that I don't use too much myself, but I know some people do. It's a way of sort of giving a real sort of visual wraparound to an entire sort of section of a mind map. So for example, if we wanted to highlight this entire visual working section, we could say, let's put a boundary around that. And you see we get this rather horribly sort of color clashed boundary. Again, because it's MindManager, we can right click and say format that and say, let's just give that a little bit more of a sort of aesthetic alignment there, maybe get something like that. And then we might also want to change those just to perhaps be, for example, a white fill that makes it a little bit easier to read. But the key point is a boundary is a nice way perhaps of making a chunk of information or an entire sort of branch stand out in slightly differently. So worth being aware of as a sort of visual working option. Finally, there's incredible power in MindManager, as I said, when it comes to managing information. So there are 3 features here I just want to highlight. There are many more, of course, but 3 features that we use daily, and most people do when they use MindManager, are hyperlinks, notes, and the task information. So hyperlinks allow you to add a link, as it suggests, into any topic in the map. So we can link to lots of different things, including files, folders, and websites. And this is very powerful functionality when you start to build up things like project plans or market analysis or study guides or whatever it might be, to put little signposts into your mind maps to direct you to other information without cluttering up your mind map is very powerful. So for example, we can say to insert here a link to a file, do a little drop down menu, and then it's going to enable me to just look into my folder structure. What have we got here? Let's say a localization. There's probably a spreadsheet or something. There you go. There's a Google spreadsheet. So we're going to link to that. And now I've got a little symbol here that tells me if you click that, you're going to pop open your Google spreadsheet with whatever that was I've saved in there, a German translation of the website. Other things we might do is we might link to an entire folder. So for example, I might link to a folder for a particular client or a particular project, just so at the highest level, I've kind of got that information. So let's say I want to just link to our community folder. I just save that right here in the map, and therefore I've got really quick jumping off points now to go to the key documents I need for whatever it is I'm working on. Likewise, we can also link to websites. So we can use that same functionality and, for example, link to a website called BiggerPlate.com. We don't necessarily have to link, by the way, to that home domain of .com. We could be linking to a really specific, very long URL on a particular journal, on a particular page, on a particular website, buried in the depths of the website. The key thing is MindManager is going to save that little bookmark for us. And it means we can not only jump straight to that web page by clicking on that link, but also that web page has been saved in context. So if you imagine this is a project plan, perhaps, I've saved a website into my map, meaning I'm getting a lot more explanation around why I've saved that website than I would do by just bookmarking it in my browser. I don't know about anybody else, but I've got browsers packed with bookmarks that I don't recognize and I don't remember why I bookmarked them. That very rarely happens when I bookmark and sort of save a hyperlink in a mind map, because it's always got the kind of surrounding context. It's in a particular part of this branch structure that probably tells me why it's relevant and why I've saved it. But the key thing is you're able to pull in lots of external resources into your mind map here, but you'll notice it's very manageable. It hasn't made my map look cluttered or crazy. It's just little signals and signposts in the MindManager software to say, if you click here, you're going to go to your folder structure related to community or whatever it might be. Another feature that I use extensively is the notes feature in MindManager. So a general principle with mind maps is we want to try and stick to just a few keywords at a time. You'll notice here in this presentation, most of the topics have just got 1 or 2 or 3 keywords. We're trying to avoid big chunks of text and long sentences, because that's what most of us feel overwhelmed with when we're handed big documents, proposals, or those kind of tasks. So again, in MindManager, what we can do is add notes. We can add notes to any topic for extra info. So here we've got a topic, and I can say to insert a note, and it's going to pop open this side panel where I can add lots of extra info without creating clutter in the map. This document, by the way, can sort of go on, not forever, I suspect, but for as long as you're going to want it to. So we can paste a huge amount of text in here. I quite often will copy and paste text from websites or even chunks of emails, just so I've got it right at my fingertips in the mind map. But importantly, once I close that down, all we see in MindManager is that little icon that tells me I've got some extra information just beneath the surface. Now, notes can be attached to every single topic in the mind map if you wanted, but you'll see the mind map itself doesn't become any harder to manage. You're not suddenly being overwhelmed by how much text there is in any one of these notes, but at any point you can just open it up and see what was in there. A really powerful way to pull lots of information into your mind map without losing that easy maneuverability that we showed you earlier. To remove those notes, we just click right click and remove, like so. Finally, I mentioned earlier the task information functions within MindManager. Really simple functionality, but really useful when you start to build up sort of project plans or sort of team planning exercises. And there's lots of things you can do in MindManager. Again, I sort of advise people to use it sort of cautiously. Just because you can fill in all of these different fields doesn't mean you necessarily have to. I tend to focus when I'm using this on just the who, the what, and the when. So in any given topic, I might suggest, right, it's got a delivery date of the 28th of October. Maybe I want to keep track of how progressed it is. Maybe I'm 25% through the task. And here's where I can also then assign a person to it by saying it's a Liam task, for example. So just there, I've given myself in the map very simple who, what, and when task information. It's got to be due by the 28th. It's been assigned to Liam, and it's 25% done. An important return point here is to the filtering. So now I've added this task information in, I can actually now filter on that information as well. So if I come to the filter and I say, show me everything in this mind map that's been assigned to Liam, let's just remove those other filters. Show me everything that's been assigned to Liam. That's going to reduce that entire presentation map to just this icon. Imagine again that project planning situation where you're maybe assigning multiple people, multiple tasks. To be able to take that big project plan and reduce it to just the tasks that have been assigned to Liam, and then get an update from Liam as to how they are going. And Liam can say, actually, I'm about 75% through that, so it should be fine to be completed by the 28th. Very powerful way of managing projects and plans without getting buried with really heavyweight project management tools. So that's a quick look at hopefully some of the most useful core features of the MindManager software. I'm hoping it's going to be particularly useful for those of you who've maybe just downloaded the trial or are just about to start exploring. So with the time left, I'm just going to do a very quick flick through some example mind maps. It's always a little bit tricky in these sessions to sort of give a good balance of what's possible, but I'm just going to look at some work maps, some study maps, and some home maps as an example. So let's take a look first at some work mind maps and see how maybe some of those features and functions have been used. So mind mapping is quite often sort of not confused with, but mushed together with brainstorming. Now, mind mapping isn't going to do brainstorming for you, and mind mapping is not necessarily brainstorming. The best way to think of mind mapping and brainstorming is that mind mapping is a fantastic tool to support a well-designed brainstorming process. It's an amazing way to capture and organize the outputs, the ideas from a brainstorming process. Now, there are hundreds of mind map templates and examples on BiggerPlate to help with brainstorming. One example would be this one here. Scamper is a pretty well-established sort of brainstorming framework where you're encouraged to think about what would happen if you substitute, combine, adapt, modify. This particularly, I think, real stretch to make the acronym work, put to other uses, eliminate or reverse. Now, the idea here is that you simply start to use that basic building functionality in MindManager. You pull your way around the mind map to jump to wherever it is you want to focus. You decide, actually, this isn't so much an elimination, it's more of a reverse. So we're going to move that topic up there. We suddenly think, actually, these things here, well, actually, there's a big link here with that over here. So you just use these very simple sort of prompts, and they don't have to be these ones, they could be anything, to build out your thinking and brainstorm your ideas in the mind map. And importantly, it's the structure, it's this tree structure, this branch structure that's going to help turn your random ideas into something usable, something manageable, something that you can actually work with. Anybody who's ever been in these brainstorming sessions where you end up with hundreds of post-its, lots of good ideas on flip charts, but then nothing really seems to come of it, it's quite often really because there's just no coherent structure or organization of those ideas. It's not that the ideas were bad, it's that the brainstorm wasn't very well designed and managed if all you've done is just throw them out into a big pile. What you really need to do is categorize and prioritize those ideas and information in order to figure out where you're actually going to focus your effort and attention. And mind maps is a great way to structure the outputs, the ideas that come out during a brainstorming process. As I've alluded to earlier, there's a lot of functionality in MindManager related to projects and planning, and it's one of the most popular sort of topics on BiggerPlate.com is project management and planning and productivity. So project plan examples, here's one example, and you'll notice here, by the way, I'm just clicking these little symbols. These are those file hyperlinks, just helping me jump directly to the file I want instead of having to open up my folders and try and find wherever it was and remember what it was called. So we've just got these hyperlinks taking me to these other folders. So here's an example, project plan. This is a template available on BiggerPlate where you've got prompts. You don't have to follow this. It's not something you've got to follow very strictly. For example, you might say, actually, we don't need all this section about constraints. We're going to delete that. We're going to just do some definitions, some deliverables. And here's where you might put out output 1, output 2, whatever they might be, output 3, and you might start to use, for example, some of those priority icons to say, whatever happens, this first thing must be delivered. And we can also then start to add those progress icons, for example, to say, as the project progresses, how close are we to delivering output 1, output 2, output 3, for example. So very simple tools and tasks. Likewise, in the project planning, we get down to the scheduling, and that's where you might start to identify action items. So we might have send proposal as an item. We might have gather quotes. And we might have sort of agreed terms as 3 actions. Once again, we can highlight all of those and add that progress icon. And here's where we might start to do some of those other things, like say the proposal needs to happen by the 4th of November. So that's a start date. We're going to actually put an end date on it. Again, we're going to assign that maybe to Liam. And we've got a sense of progress on that. Maybe Liam's created it. So in here, Liam might say, here's the draft proposal. And he might use that hyperlink function to link to a document in his computer that maybe is the proposal. So not only have we got the how far through the task is he, we've also got the link to his work in progress if we want to. So again, you can see Liam's name could be attached to multiple items. You might have somebody else's name, a Graham perhaps, attached to other items in the map. And once you build out that sort of project schedule with all of these task information things, you're then giving yourself, as I showed earlier, that very powerful filtering function in MindManager to say, show me all of the Liam tasks. And you could even be as specific as say, show me all of the Liam tasks that are not yet started. And then we jump straight into where we've got those Liam tasks marked. So that's a quick example of a project plan. There's also other things like more sort of written documents like a business plan or proposals. And here's an example of a business plan document created, again, available on BiggerPlate.com, where somebody's just using these key headings and prompts again to build out their business plan according to these headings. And again, any one of these headings can be taken out if it's not relevant to your particular business. But importantly, here's where we might start to use some of the notes function in MindManager. So maybe we build out a little bit of our competitor analysis. We might use the hyperlinks to each of those competitor websites. So maybe we've got competitor for A here. We might have a link to their website, www.website.com. Save that into our map so we can jump straight to that competitor website if we want to have a look at the detail. And then what we might also do is create some notes in here to say key competitor because, and start to really build out the detail in these notes without overwhelming the structure and the easy to navigate nature of our mind map. Importantly, if you use something like a business plan, you can actually export all of this to Word. But I'm going to show you that in a context of a studying map in just a moment. But you can see hopefully how a very sort of big comprehensive document and comprehensive process can be broken down in mind maps into much more manageable individual chunks. And as I showed at the beginning, to hide everything else and then just zone in on the area that we want to focus on in the mind map is very simple with MindManager. So running out of time a little bit, I'll just jump. Here's a strategic thinking framework. So again, using simple headings and established frameworks in a mind map to brainstorm and capture and organize ideas around political. So you capture maybe your observations, and then you think about what are the impacts, how might that impact our business, and again, what might those actions be. So really good ways to build up and break down information that you need in your working world. From a studying perspective, I tend to think of mind mapping really in sort of 3 kind of key areas: note-taking, subject summaries, and written assignments. From a note-taking perspective, it's just about capturing ideas and information in the map as they come and then restructuring and organizing them. So here's a mind map created whilst watching a video, about a 10-minute video about Mesoamerica. So you see all the person has done here is just capture little kind of keywords and kind of core information and just started to break it down into this kind of structure. Nothing particularly glamorous about this mind map. It's just capturing information as it comes and saying, oh, actually, this belongs under here, the river system, the soil. That's all about being in southern Mexico. Now I've moved on from southern Mexico, I'm going to hide that, but just easily capturing and structuring ideas and information, pulling in some imagery if we wanted to, if we found that useful. We could also be, for example, using hyperlinks to Wikipedia pages or other sites that are useful. So note-taking in mind maps, very, very simple, pretty easy to do as well if you just get familiar using that keyboard map building technique. Subject summaries, that's really where your notes become perhaps tidier, a little bit more visually organized, and maybe a little bit more edited and curated. And that's where you maybe end up with something that sort of summarizes quite neatly the key points and information about a particular topic. So here's a studying summary map about one of England's most famous kings, King Henry VIII. He's the one that lots of people know about primarily because he was the one who had 6 wives, which was relatively unusual. So again, in this mind map, all this person has done is captured some key information. Again, this could be for somebody who's maybe in the early stages of high school, and if it was in later stages of high school or university, you would expect a much more comprehensive, built out, complicated map. But again, the structure of the map is just helping this person to break down all of the information that they think they are going to need perhaps for their exam, including, as you see here, another one of those little hyperlinks. This takes them off to a Wikipedia page about the wives of Henry VIII. We won't jump there right now because, as interesting as it is, we're a little bit short of time. So we move through from note-taking into very coherent subject summaries that are going to help us prepare for our exams. But MindManager is also incredibly powerful for written assignments. And I know this because part of the reason I started BiggerPlate was my experience of university a long, long time ago now. And here's actually an essay plan, a written assignment from 2007 for me. And I really struggled with written assignments. I just tended to start writing. And as a result, all of my teachers and lecturers would always say they were very sort of all over the place. There wasn't much structure. Now you'll notice here in this mind map, I'm going to show you how I used to ignore lots of the advice I now give. So you'll see big chunks of text here. But really what this was about for me was organizing and structuring in advance the ideas that I wanted to use in my essay and think through what is the most logical order for them to be written. So again, following that clockwise structure, I broke down what is my introduction going to say, what is my first paragraph, and you'll see I've then started to think, well, in my first paragraph, I'm going to cover these areas. And then you'll see in each area, I've basically just been capturing kind of key information, ideas, references that I wanted to use, my ideas. Now, all of this turned into, in a bit further down the line, something that I could then say to MindManager. What I wanted it to do was export this to Microsoft Word. Now, importantly, what I would advise 20-year-old Liam to do now is, instead of having these big chunks of text like this in the map, I would use that notes feature. So I'd take that out of there, and I would just pop open those notes and pop it into there. Likewise with this other quote here, I'm going to copy that, put it into the notes here, just to illustrate one point very quickly. So you'll see we've now got this introduction, a chunk of text, and then 2 references that I think are relevant. Now if I tell MindManager to send this into Microsoft Word, what we're going to hopefully see is something nicely structured. And really, I'm going to do a quick export here in the interest of time. Save this to my desktop. Let's see what MindManager does. So what the software is doing right now is just working clockwise again around that mind map structure, and it's going to push all of that text and information into a Word document for me. It's probably going a little bit slowly right now just because of the number of things running on my computer. This normally would not take MindManager very long to do at all. I might just be pushing my laptop a little bit hard right now. But what it's doing is just moving clockwise around the map and taking that structured information in the map and pushing it into a Word document. So instead of starting your thinking in a Word document, which is a great writing tool, but it's not a great thinking tool, I would always advise students to use a mind mapping tool like MindManager to structure and organize the ideas and information that they want to include in their written document, and then export it to Word. So you've then really, all you've got to do in the Word document is the editing and the sort of spell checking, and if you still do print things, I guess the printing. So there we go. MindManager's sort of found its feet a bit and it's up and running, processing that document, and is hopefully going to push that through within the next few seconds into a Word document. As I say, this is not an illustration of how fast MindManager usually does this. This is a Liam laptop, I think, running on fumes with a few too many things running, and it's also not actually plugged in, I can now see. So hopefully we're going to get our Word document relatively quickly. And importantly, what I wanted to illustrate was those blocks of text that I moved into the notes. They're going to come through into the document but my mind map was made much easier by putting them into notes, but they're also going to be pulled through into that Word document as that blocks of text. So just remember that intro section where we put those blocks of text into the notes, and then hopefully when this finishes up, we can see how those have come. Here we go. So let's open up that Word document and see if we've been successful. So I've shown this Word export to all sorts of people in all sorts of organizations, and they absolutely love it. So MindManager's done a quick export here, so it might not be perfect because we didn't really tell it specifically what to do. So it's imported an image there at the start. You probably don't need that in the beginning of your essay. It's then also given us a table of contents. Now, again, I don't need that if it's a written essay, but if it was that business plan document or a project proposal, you might need that table of contents. Here it's a bit of duplication. So now we get into the actual written document. So you see here's my introduction. Now again, MindManager's put a numbering scheme on it. We probably don't need that, but that's, again, we didn't tell MindManager not to do that. But here you'll see as those two quotes that I put into the notes, and you'll see MindManager just push them through. But importantly, now in the Word document, I've got a structure to start building out my writing. I've got my ideas and the information I want to include nicely organized in advance by using the mind map structure, which is really well suited to that. And then I'm going to use the Word document as my writing, editing, and printing tool. So that's a quick look at written assignments. Finally, just to finish up, a couple of quick looks at some sort of home personal type plans. You've got everything on BiggerPlate, from things like vacation planning. So again, here's an example that somebody's created where they're just capturing all of the thoughts and ideas in relationship to an upcoming holiday. You're probably using those notes and hyperlinks to pull all the potential information together for them. On a personal note, we know a lot of people are using mind mapping for things like planning out sort of life or their career. So perhaps looking, for example, at sort of questioning, what are my passions, my core values, where am I today, where do I want to improve, what about my current job role, positives and negatives, what about my future job role, what do I ideal company look like? What does my ideal job role look like? In my ideal job, what am I doing daily, regularly, or never? So using a very simple set of prompts to brainstorm and think through some quite important topics. And personal organization, another big popular topic on BiggerPlate. People using mind mapping and MindManager maps as sort of a dashboard, a control center for everything that's going on in their world, from their personal tasks to remember sort of birthdays and buying presents, all the way through to projects that are in progress. And again, using all of that structure to break it down into more manageable chunks. An area up here for all the different clients that you work with, prioritizing all the different projects. And again, using probably some of those hyperlinks and notes to pull in all the information we need into one place. So a little bit of a sprint finish from me there. I'm sorry for rushing slightly at the end. I got obviously a bit carried away showing you formatting options in MindManager. So I'm just going to close down some of these maps so I can get back to my presentation, hopefully. And just come this way to here we are. By means of conclusion, just throw up on the screen here as a reminder, if you do want to join BiggerPlate, the core website is free. That's going to enable you to access the mind map library and share your own maps if you want to. And of course, if you want to upgrade to BiggerPlate Pro and get everything we've got to offer, don't forget to use that discount code on the screen here, which ends at the end of October, and will save you a nice healthy 25% on the price of BiggerPlate Pro. So that's it from me. I'm going to just pause here and check for any questions. I can see somebody said, Dan, thanks for flagging that a document wasn't on screen. I've just realized that's probably going to happen because of what I did as a screen share. I forgot to say share the whole screen. I was just sharing MindManager. Let me just illustrate really quickly because that's a bit of an oversight there. Share screen, share the entire screen this time. And I think, Dan, what you're referencing is the Word document wasn't on screen. Hopefully, this is just illustrating that at a glance. I was talking about how it's given me a table of contents that I don't really need, but then actually the written text, if I just get past the table of contents, was down here. And that's where I was just highlighting that in that introduction section, I moved those quotes from those two authors into the notes, and you'll see that the notes have been pushed through into this structure. Sorry about that screen sharing, Dan, forgot about that specifically within the screen sharing platform. So hopefully that illustrates the point around the Word document, but if anybody wants me to illustrate that a little bit more clearly and actually see what I'm talking about, I'll be very happy to follow up with that. Thanks, Dan, for the flag on that. That's always very useful to know. So I've got just a couple of minutes left, and I can't see any obvious questions coming in. Very quiet group today, which is sometimes a good sign, sometimes not a good sign. But as I said at the beginning, if you have any follow-up questions or information that you want to try and find out about BiggerPlate, about MindManager, and about mind mapping in general, please do feel free to reach out to me. My email address is liam@biggerplate.com. And of course, as I said earlier, you can find me on LinkedIn, where I'm very active and relatively easy to find. If anybody is new to MindManager and is maybe trying to introduce it into an organization, again, that's something we've helped lots of organizations with, providing templates, ideas, these kind of things. Universities as well as schools and businesses. BiggerPlate's been doing this for a long time, and again, our goal is to help people go further with mind mapping without really having to worry about trying to sell you any software. So once you've got your hands on some software, if you want some help trying to really put it into place and get people using it, which is really where we focus, please do let us know and do get in touch. You can obviously join BiggerPlate for free. Hopefully you'll take advantage of that pro membership offer as well. But in the meantime, I wish you all a very pleasant remainder of the day, wherever you are. It looks like it's about to start my afternoon thunderstorm here in Bogota. But please do keep in touch. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions or feedback. And thank you most of all for taking time out of your day to join yet another webinar. I know there's a lot of webinars and virtual events going on all the time these days. So I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and listen to some random British guy talking about mind mapping. So take care. Thank you very much for joining me, and do keep in touch if you have any follow-up questions to today's session.